Hey everyone, I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Upper Canada District School Board for September 11th, 2013 to order and ask that you all rise and join in the singing of our national anthem. Thanks everyone. So we have new spots at the table. We did the semi-regular shuffle at the board table, so welcome to your new spot. I see David also matched my moves with some moves of his own, so I'm trying to figure out how all that works. So welcome everyone, and we have two new people that I'd like to recognize tonight. We have our new student trustee, Tyler Harbers. Tyler, welcome. And we have Derek Castleman, who is working the behind the scenes room. He's a new addition to our communication team, and he can't really see him, but hi Derek, if you're watching. And also in replacement of an old favorite, a new favorite, we have Nancy Barclay. Welcome, Nancy.
Sharon, the point where you remind me what high school Peter's from?
From Derek, you are from Tyler, you are from
What was that?
Rothwell, Eisenberg.
Oh, good.
I think that's in your area. I would have thought you would have known that, Trustee Buckman.
Glad
Okay. Was that a good point of order?
Yeah, a good point of order.
No. Okay, Director, roll call.
Trustee Buckman.
Present.
Trustee Cartner.
Present.
Trustee Garrow is on the teleconference line. Trustee McPherson.
Present.
Trustee McAllister.
Present.
Vice Chair McDonald. He is here. Vice Chair McMillan.
Present.
Trustee McRae.
Present.
Chair Petersma.
Present.
Trustee Richards.
Present.
Trustee Swan.
Present.
And student trustee Tyler Harbers.
Present.
Yeah.
All right, board, I'd like a motion to approve the consent agenda items 2 and 2.3, moved by Trustee McMillan, First Vice McMillan, and Trustee Swan. First Vice McMillan.
Trustee Swan.
All right. Moving on now, are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Motion to move into committee of the whole. Trustee McPherson and trustee Karkner. Go ahead and cast your ballots, your vote.
Chair Peters, my vote yes.
You vote yes, thanks. Trustee McAllister, yep. Okay. All right, our first item tonight is the recognition of our Ted Kennedy Award winners. And Mr. David Coombs, Superintendent David Coombs will introduce this item. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Trustees, it's my pleasure to kick off the school year on such a positive and inspirational note. For the past 10 years, the Upper Canada District School Board has been participating in the Terry Fox National School Run Day. And in a couple of weeks' time, on Thursday, September 26th, the 2013 School Run Day will take place. Last year, if you'll recall, around this time, I was making the inaugural presentation of the Ted Kennedy Legacy Awards. The Ted Kennedy Legacy Awards goes to those schools, both elementary and secondary, that raise the most money for the Terry Fox Foundation on their school run day per capita or per student. And fortunately, we have representatives from both winners this year, from South Crosby and from Charlan. And it has been such a pleasure to work with all the schools in our board as they prepare for this this day. I'd like to point out, over the past 10 years, the Upper Canada School Board has raised over $600,000 as schools, for the Terry Fox Foundation. Last year, 2012, we raised over $75,000. And leading the way again was South Crosby, who raised over $2,700, and Charlan, one of our smallest high schools, with $3,300. I'd now like to ask Principal Monique Antoine Hartley and staff member Amy Whalen to come forward and accept their Ted Kennedy Legacy Award. Did you want to say a couple words quickly? Mr. Chair, I'd like to, with your, if it's okay, I'd like to pass this over to Principal Hart.
It is with great pride and that South Crosby staff, students, and the community accept this award. Even though it's a great honor to be recognized for our contribution to keeping Ted Kennedy and Terry's dream alive, it is also, we believe, a part of teaching our kids how to give back to their communities. Cancer has touched so many of the South Crosby community that the dream of eradicating the insidious disease is a very strong motivator in itself. The students of South Crosby have been inspired for several years by the dedication and passion of Mrs. Amy Whalen, who has motivated the students by every year by doing something. Most recently, 2 years ago, she shaved her head. Last year, she became a rainbow, and or whatever other dreams she has. It's regrettable that this year Mrs. Whalen's father has been diagnosed with cancer, so that the student focus this year will again be motivated by her passion, and all of our community wishes to her the best and her family the best as we do our part to stamp out cancer. So, thank you.
We'll take more photos outside. We'll take a quick one right here. I'd now like to ask Principal Trevor Wheeler has another school event that he's participating in tonight from Charlan, but representing Charlan are Chantel and Carl Armstrong. And this husband and wife team have been instrumental in promoting Terry's dream at Charlan And for a second year in a row, I'd like to present the Ted Kennedy Legacy Award to Charlan High School.
It's an honor for us to accept this award on behalf of our staff and our students who do an exceptional job every year to make this event worthwhile and the money going to a great cause. We know how much Ted meant to this board, and we know how much Terry Fox meant to Ted. So it's been a great privilege to have this award hang on our school wall for another year. Thank you.
Thank you, trustees. It was very well said. This was very close to Ted Kennedy's heart. Ted was a really special mentor for me, and I think it's wonderful that this board recognizes Ted in such a manner. Are there any questions that I can answer before we go out and we take a few more photos? Thank you very much.
Thank you. What he did. Okay. Now move on to our discussion items. The first one was added to the agenda by Trustee Buckland, titled French Immersion. Trustee Buckland, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am proposing a discussion of French immersion. As I see, we're attempting to run two programs, the immersion and the basic. It's causing some problems in our small rural schools, and I think it might be time now to look at having in kindergarten only immersion and applying extra resources to those students who are finding it a little more difficult than usual. And so that is my thought on it, and so that the small rural schools will be able to keep their kindergartens and not have them drain out and suffer low enrollment as a result of program. So it maintains a community base and a program base at the same time.
Trustee McPherson?
I'm just going to share what I've observed in my area. I think early immersion is hugely successful in my ward. 20 years ago, somebody had told me that we would be engaged that much. I'd have told them that they were dreaming. The biggest disadvantage I see, and I've been very public about this, is that when we put early immersion into a single school, in a family of schools, we set up a competitive situation that even our co-chairman board can't even hope to match. I think I'm going along the same lines as Art in that we see our small rural schools decimated at the kindergarten level. I've got schools that are running, if they get 14 kids, they figure they're lucky. And yet, the designated French immersion site in my ward is at what, 100 and almost 200% capacity. Because what happens is I have one of the largest wards in the Upper Canada School Board. And when you put in a program-driven school that's not serving, like, let's face it, an early immersion school does not serve a community. It serves a program. And it is, I've got a school north of Perth that you could put all the students in one wing. So I realize that there is an awful lot of resources required to deliver early immersion. But what's good for one should be good for all. And I realize it's a huge, huge stretch to say that we can offer it in all of our schools. Same as we now offer all-day kindergarten in all of our schools. But we have still got that competitive process where people are choosing programs over your local school. And I've seen it happen in other wards where there are more than one site. And that perhaps is a beginning. Like I believe in the Almont family of schools, both the schools in Almont offer early immersion. In Beckwith, they offer early immersion, as does Caldwell. So I agree, we have to re-examine how we're going to deliver it. Like I've got kids riding a school bus from Watson's Corners to Perth to attend an early immersion school, when they are going by no less than 2 elementary schools that are much closer to home that do not offer the program. So I think it's hugely successful. And personally, if my children had had the option, because more and more people will actually send a child to early immersion than they will to break their peer group and send them to what we call late immersion, or it used to be our early immersion program. And so I think we need to at least take a look and see if we can't enhance the program and offer it in more schools. And that's just my 2 cents.
Trustee McMillan?
Through you, Chair. I'm just, it's not just a rural situation. I mean, it's happening here in my own riding. I'm wondering if we look at taking this to a bigger picture and maybe making the core French program a much stronger program, and then enriching off of that program in all of our schools. It just seems when we have one isolated enrichment program or French program, that's creating the problem. But if our core French program was a very solid, very rich program, we'd have that in all of our schools. I'm just throwing that in for discussion.
Trustee McAllister?
I just, while I think the trustees on the other side here, we're talking primarily about kindergarten, correct?
That's where the impact comes, right?
Right. I must say that, I must bring it to the table that I have had contact with at least 1 or 2 parents from the western end of my ward who expressed a similar concern with regard to the lack of French immersion at, for example, Gananoque Intermediate Secondary School. The fact remains that these programs are very intensive from a program point of view as well as from a resource point of view. And the ministry has different levels of funding, as you know, for core, extended, and immersion. I sympathize with everything that's been said, and I quite agree with it. I think, I'm wondering if it is not time to re-examine the delivery of all French programs in our board with some of the issues that you have raised. And if we are so inclined to do so, then I do have a motion prepared that might assist in that.
Trustee McDonald?
I guess I'm struggling with this one a little bit. I support French immersion, but I hear the comments saying that French immersion is being used as a somewhat of an equalizer within our battle for market share for students within our catchment areas. If we're going to have a discussion about that, market share or capture rate, then I think the discussion should be a lot broader than French immersion. If it's around the delivery of French, it seems like we do this on an annual basis, or every so many years we kind of raise that issue. From my standpoint, my children in elementary school here in Ontario benefited from the immersion program. And I can tell you that within the city of Cornwall, it's almost a mandatory piece for us to say that if we don't offer it, we won't get the students. Although we do know that not every child has, I don't want to say the abilities, or is comfortable, I guess, within within the immersion setting. So one thing that's benefited Cornwall is we have the dual track schools, and we have, students population of over 350. It's very easy to run a dual track program when you have 300, 400 students in a school. When we looked at this years ago, the French program delivery was 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 60 minutes, extended French immersion. And we decided at that time that we would try and put French immersion into as many places as possible. And we decided on those, I think, very strategically to where we were going to place those centers. One of the struggles that I have continually on French immersion is that we put a lot of effort into French immersion in the elementary, but the output of students graduating with a French immersion certificate is very low. So, are we prepared to continue to put resources into something as a capture issue to try and gain that market share, knowing full well that we're going to end up with students who don't graduate with the French immersion certificate? Are we going to put other measures in place to try and make sure that the efforts done up front at elementary are followed through on the secondary side of things, and we have students with French immersion certificate graduating? I'm a little worried that we just look at one aspect of something that seems to be a bigger issue for us, and I think we need a little bit more understanding, a little bit more discussion around what we want to try and achieve, and I don't want to isolate a discussion to just French immersion or delivery within kindergarten. So maybe we flesh it out a little bit further. I'm not sure that we'll flesh it out tonight, but we can look at it over the next few weeks, a few months perhaps. But I'm a little cautious about just looking at French immersion at this point.
Trustee Swan?
This was just as an open discussion item, and I'd like to see a bit more information in regards to how many immersion classes, how many immersion classes we offer at the kindergarten level, how many extended French classes we're offering, in a picture of what we're offering as a board as a whole. As a new trustee, I'm not familiar with areas outside my ward very much, and even though one of my children is in the extended French program. I'm also concerned about programming and supporting it, like Trustee McDonald said, at the high school level, and I have had concerns from parents there in regards to how do they get their extended French certificate when they're having programming problems because it's conflicting with a math or an English credit that they also require. And are we supporting it in summer school by offering summer school for that French? I don't know the answer to those questions, and I'd like some more information on it.
Trustee Buckland?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I put it on the agenda to stimulate discussion, and I know there are larger issues. I mean, I would like us to look at the early learning styles, the effect of oral only in French. In SD&G, or in the East, we used to have a variety of French programs so that you were able to keep your community school, and you could have late immersion, early immersion, intermediate immersion, all sorts of programs, 60-minute, 90-minute, and still move into high school and take on the French language learning there. When we look at the other end of it, we know the rules in public service at the Ontario level, at the federal level. To work in Eastern Ontario, we need the French language, even if it's just at the oral level. And so, yes, I would like to look at this as a seminar discussion and get some professional lecturing on aspects of this whole situation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Trustee McPherson?
When we did Boundary 2020, we harmonized the French instruction delivery across the board. We established consistent parameters for core French delivery, and that caused a certain amount of anguish in some wards. We also harmonized in that the delivery of a common early immersion program. In other words, it starts in kindergarten now, and it is patchwork quilt that we had before. In my ward, we're a victim of our own success. There is nothing wrong with the way the program is being delivered in my ward. It's just, it's been oversubscribed. We need to set ourselves up. I'm not asking for a comprehensive review of the program. What I am looking for personally, representing my ward, would be an opportunity to extend the program. In other words, if we've got 350 kids crammed into a school that's designed for 125, we need to look at how we can better serve those students in a second location if necessary, or a third or fourth. Let's look at how far we're transporting a handful of students, because not all parents, some parents will engage in the local school rather than put their children on a bus for an hour and some minutes for a program. So I'm looking at, from my perspective, I think we need to talk about it, but I'm looking at it as an enhancement of a very successful program in my ward.
Trustee Karkner?
This issue came up in one of my schools in my ward last year about a school, a group of parents wanting French immersion in the school, but the problem is we've got some parents who want to continue with just the core or feel that their children can't handle the immersion program, and as a result of the decision that was made in that particular school, our numbers are depleting rapidly. Again, it's a very small school and the only English one in the community that we're trying to hang on to, but because we didn't get French immersion in there, I think it has hurt us greatly, and I too would like to see where we can enhance the immersion in more of our schools, the program that already exists.
Okay. Trustee McDonald?
I'm open to the discussion about delivery of French and French immersion. I mean, I think it's important that we always look to have continuous improvement. I'm not suggesting that we don't discuss it, but what I'm concerned about is, are we trying to resolve depleting enrollment in a school by saying French immersion is the solution? If we are, then we've got to look at more than French immersion. And so if we're looking at French, that's great. But if the underlying issue is enrollment, then we need to make sure that we're looking at everything. There may be other factors, so let's not scope it only to try and resolve one issue with what we think is the only solution at this point. So if we're gonna look at French immersion delivery and making sure that we're moving forward and getting those strides that we want, I mean, I alluded to it earlier, my biggest frustration is that we put a lot of money into elementary immersion delivery, yet we don't have, because here's the thing, we all say that in order to succeed in Eastern Ontario, we need to be French. We need to have the French speaking skills, but yet we don't have people following through with that commitment after grade 7, after grade 8. So I get it, if we don't have it, it hurts us in an elementary setting from an enrollment standpoint, but is that the only solution that we have? So I don't know how we want to frame it or where we want to go, but I just want to make sure, are we dealing with French or are we dealing with enrollment?
I think that one of the things that we need to contemplate is that although for some of you who weren't on the board, 2008 may seem like an eternity, 2008 we did do a full review, meetings, reports, and so I think in fairness to that, before we move too far on this issue, we should really get a report on how successful that implementation was. Did we accomplish what we set out to do? And because there were some, you know, and it's been raised, different people, we wanted to make sure the curriculum was being delivered the same, that there was, the programs looked the same, so that PD could be offered, that more effectively, that times were the same, and that kind of thing. Have we succeeded in doing that? And I think once we have a better handle on that, then that might help us frame where we want to go specifically with French. Now, Trustee Buckland, I don't have a problem asking for that. However, you premised your discussion on the ability for us to keep small schools viable, if I'm not mistaken. And that, if that's the focus of raising it, then that really is a different report. Maybe French immersion plays into that, I don't know. So maybe you could just help frame whether it's the French immersion part of it that you're most interested in, or whether it is keeping small schools open.
Oh, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm interested in maintaining a community school. And as I see program disrupting that sense of community, maybe it is the new community, you know, with single parents and everybody working and people willing to ride buses an hour and a half, that I'm missing the sense of community, and maybe it's regional. But I would like to look at immersion from that point of view.
Okay, and I guess if I might indulge the board, I have a question then. You've raised it as just adding kindergarten. How does just adding one grade protect a community to French immersion? Like I'm not getting.
Well, as you enroll in a program 10 miles away, then you've enrolled for a lifetime. So you're not part of your home school. You're part of a program situation. For example, we closed Martintown because there was insufficient enrollment, yet there were 50 more kids who were willing to travel an hour and a half, to get some other programming perhaps, to get kindergarten babysitting, who knows what, but it seemed as though the immersion was what was dragging them away from maintaining a community base.
So are you asking then that it would be rolled out throughout the school after kindergarten? Like it would just be kindergarten in grade 1 and grade 2?
Well, the program would be maintained, yes, this is what I would hope.
So that you would have another French immersion site.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think that's a little different though than what you, I don't know whether other people have the same opinion, but I think that's a little different if you're asking to set up new French immersion sites, because the way I understood it was that you would do French immersion in kindergarten, and then after kindergarten the kids would go to the French immersion site.
That's not as
No.
No, so you're talking about setting up French immersion schools. Okay, all right, Trustee McPherson?
I kind of paralleling what Greg's thinking here. The viability of small rural schools is an entirely separate issue. There's a huge variety of reasons and rationale why small rural schools are becoming less viable. I had occasion to hear Premier Designate Wynne speak in July, and part of her keynote speech did refer to the importance of community and rural schools. However, in the next sentence, she made she made it quite clear that sustainability and viability was to be a part of that process. French immersion is one thing. Like in my ward, it's hugely successful. Yes, it's affecting the smaller rural schools, but there are a large number of other factors. Like take the average age of the residents of North Helmsley Township, for instance, is now closing on something like 45. Well, 45-year-old people tend not to have children in school. A great many of our communities are becoming retirement havens. There are just not as many children in the rural communities. simply offering French immersion is not going to make those schools that much more viable. Maybe a handful of parents won't choose to send their kids on a bus somewhere else, but they're still gonna put them on a bus to go to the local school. So either we talk about early immersion, or we talk about, but if we're not careful, we're going to slide right into a Boundary 2020 process here. That's like, are we gonna do a systematic review of enrollments across the board again? Or program delivery, like, oh.
Okay, trustee Swan.
I'd just like to say a couple things. First of all, 45-year-olds do have children in school.
Oh, don't tell me about that one.
Trustee McPherson, so I just like to correct you on that one.
I think I'm on the other side.
And, but no offense taken there. I'm a huge proponent of rural schools and small schools and looking at their viability and ways to keep them viable. But like Chair Petersma said, it's two totally different issues. And I'm wondering if Trustee Buckland's just referring to one school or a board-wide review is for each.
Trustee Buckland, you wish to?
Well, I'm suggesting that program is removing the sense of community as a definition for a school. And in our own area, we see competition. We have 4 boards, so if we're not offering the immersion in our local school, if the other school board has a school closer offering that program, they would go there. So I see immersion as a key factor in this, and I would like to look at immersion as a factor. Of course, if there are no students, yes, you're not going to maintain a school for very few students. But we're seeing, as I said, we're seeing immersion being the target which takes students away. And we have, you pass by schools and they look like doghouse villages. You know, at Amherst Corner, I don't know how many portables they have now. We have 4 portables at Williamstown, with a school nearby capable of handling many more students. And so, yes, there are other factors. But let's look at immersion program as something that could be introduced in every school.
I think one of the questions that would be interesting to ask is, why do people not choose their local school? And I think we all have those schools in our area where there's a certain size to them, and then they just seem to just attract, it's like a light, like a beacon, and parents flock to them. And I think they see activity, I think they see lots of teachers, and I, you know, maybe French immersion is the piece that kicks that off, I don't know. But because we tend to put French immersion also at our largest schools, so it's hard to know which one creates it, but. Trustee McPherson?
I think one thing before you head down this road you have to acknowledge is that because of the geographic size of our board, what David and Art are dealing with as trustees as to competition is entirely different than what we deal with in the western regions. For instance, in my area, it's usually the choice of one of 2 publicly funded school systems. If you want French language instruction in a French language school, you could end up driving for 2 hours. Once you hit the secondary level, your only choice is the Ottawa-Carleton region, because there are no high schools for French language instruction. So as we move from west to east and east to west, the demographics of the education system change immensely. We have to remind ourselves that our market share is still quite good, but we are dealing with almost like, well, there's a huge difference in the systems. There's competition from 4 boards in the Cornwall region. Here In the western region, it's essentially 2 boards.
Trustee McDonald?
I think, as I said earlier, I'm not necessarily promoting that we do a complete review, but I'm certainly a supporter of making sure that we're doing things the way we intended to and whether we can do them better. So I'm okay with making sure that we have a status report on what we said we were gonna implement and whether we're accomplishing that and where the areas are for improvement. I think if we look at tying it back into enrollment and trying to sustain schools, we've used a tool in the past that would allow us to solicit and get feedback from our communities through the Net Promoter Score. Maybe this is something that we would use as well in saying what's the deciding factor for you choosing your community school or from a program standpoint. There's some things that we can do to shape that in our communities to have a better understanding of what's moving them, why are they deciding some of the things that they're deciding. And that's a suggestion that we would look at using that in the coming months to get a good gauge of what our communities are actually thinking.
Okay. There was somebody else, or Trustee McAllister.
There's a larger problem here that I think we have to face at some point in that, and pardon me, we all know that almost all our secondary schools are small. And it becomes extremely difficult to develop, or to deliver a full-blown immersion program at any of our secondary schools. And I speak from experience because I taught 32 years of both core, extended, and immersion at the secondary level. And since sustaining those programs after grade 10 especially becomes extremely difficult. And there have been many factors involved, such as since I retired a number of years ago, students are expected to complete their full secondary curriculum in 4 years versus 5 years. So all of a sudden, they've lost a 5th year as an option year in which to gain credits. The availability of courses is another issue as well. So it's very complicated in my opinion, and I don't want to go down the Boundary 2020 route, Bill, nor do I want to get into a full-blown review. But I think it is time to take a look at the success of the past review that was done, I believe you said, Chair, in 2008. And so that I'm going to throw out a motion, Chair, if you wish. May I?
Sure.
And tell me if it suits your wishes and needs. And it's simply that be it resolved that a review of the delivery of French secondary language programs in the Upper Canada District School Board be conducted by the director and the senior team within the context of the FSL framework in Ontario schools. And I think that would provide the director the latitude to take a good look at the recommendations of the past review, the new factors that are involved, and the new challenges, and maybe point us in some sort of a direction that might accomplish your goal, and all our goals for the benefit of our students.
So Trustee Buckland, just before I look for a seconder, is that germane to your expectations?
It is, I would second that, and I wasn't clear on the actual wording. I'm assuming it does include evaluating the previous template of 08. That's fine, I'm with that. Maybe a time limit on it.
Yes, may I add just to that, by January 2014?
I'll wait with the director.
I guess it's seconded. The only, I understand that, but the only thing that I think that we might be better, like what if we were to, I don't want administration to have to go off and do work that then we don't use. And really, what, I think the first thing we need to do is to look at what we set out to do and how well we did it. Because we might sit around and say, well, you know what? That's good enough. And aside from going the extra distance where Trustee Buckland started out on also using it as a way to keep small schools open, because that's not in this. I think that needs to be recognized, that that's not in the motion that's now on the floor. So, you know, the motion could include like a step one, and then we review whether we wanna go forward. Like, I'm a little worried that, like, they could come, right now, we've asked them to look at how successful it was and develop a path for the future. Well, we may not need a path for the future because it may be as good as we think we're gonna get. You know what I mean? Like, I'm afraid that we're almost getting ahead of ourselves before we really said, there's a problem. Because I can tell you that it is very easy to listen and to comments made in communities. Oh, if I had French immersion in my school, I'd go there. I have a situation in my ward where we have one French immersion school. There's another school, relatively large, that keeps asking about French immersion, and yet every time I come down and show them, well, this is how many kids you're really losing, they say, really? That's it? Oh, well, never mind then. We'll carry on. And we don't even know that. We don't even really know where those kids are coming from that are filling up our immersion schools. We assume they're being drawn from other schools, and I'm sure they are. But is that where they're all coming from, or are we picking up a lot of kids from other boards? You know, that could be the issue too. So I'm a little concerned. So I raised that. Trustee
I question, as the chair making the comment, because what could be the decision of looking at the framework? A, it could be, yes, we want to make some changes. B, it could be status quo. So
right.
That could be the future outlook. So
right.
It would be covered in the same motion.
Okay, but I think the motion, though, when you ask them to do a review of delivery within the context of the FSL framework, that's different than asking them to do a review of the expectations that were laid out in Boundary 2020. I don't think the two are the same. I think that one is premised on the framework, the FSL framework, and Boundary 2020 is not necessarily based on the framework. I don't know what the relationship is between the two. That's what I'm raising. Anyway, Trustee McAllister.
I think you raise a good point, Chair. And if my seconder is amenable, I would amend it to say all of the above, but within the context of the 2008 recommendations. Would that be more acceptable as a first step?
Trustee McDonald?
I think the intent in 2008 was to make sure that we met the FSO guidelines. We were delivering the program based on what the requirements were in the ministry documentation. And then it came back to us and we made a decision at that point to say, you know what, we're fooling ourselves in some areas because we say we're doing immersion, but it wasn't immersion, it wasn't meeting the requirements. So now we've leveled that playing field, and everywhere we say there's immersion, it's meeting the ministry requirements. So we've gone through that exercise. The important aspect is not a review of how, if we're meeting the FSL, I guess at this point is, because we've done that. We know we weren't in some areas. We were delivering French and calling it something else, core French and calling it something else. So I think that admittedly we recognize that and we've corrected that. I think what we need to do is make sure that the report that was completed and the decision that we made back in the time, is it being implemented now? Because we know what the review was back then. Is it being implemented now? Where are the areas of gaps? What gaps do we have still? And where are the areas for improvement that we can deliver on? Because if we're going to come back now and make a blanket statement that we're going to offer French immersion in every school, we better start talking about the budget then too, because we've got bigger problems at that point. So there's a very, a ripple effect associated to this in many, many different areas. If we want to solve an enrollment program, we need a different discussion. If we wanted to answer the question saying, well, we're gonna offer it everywhere, then we've gotta talk budget at this point, because we can't do everything, be everything to everyone. So at some point, we need to make decisions that in some areas, we will only deliver a core program, but meet the ministry guidelines. And I think that's a struggle for us at some point, because we can't do it everywhere. It's clear that we can't do it everywhere. So I'm more inclined to go back to what the chair has said, and let's make sure that the report comes in and says, here's what we've done in the past, and here's where we're finding those gaps, if there are any.
Trustee McMillan? Sorry, Trustee McPherson.
I want to go back to something Lisa said. I think we also have to take a step back in history. Before we embarked on the Boundary 2020 review on the programming, we had a report at the board table that told us exactly what French delivery looked like in the board. In other words, a snapshot. What we're missing here tonight is the snapshot. I couldn't tell you what French language delivery looks like in Lisa's ward. I know what it looks like in my ward, but what I need before I want to start tossing the word review around, because that brings connotations of public input and consultations. I think that we could have a snapshot of what our current delivery model looks like. When we did it the last time, we looked at the picture and it was a patchwork quilt. And actually, I remember somebody at the board table, I think, won't give anybody credit for it, but said, if we taught math like we're teaching French, we're doing it wrong. And so we did make a conscious effort to, as David says, meet the ministry requirements and to streamline the process. So what we need to do now is take a look, give us a snapshot, where it's being delivered, the numbers, and things like that. That's what we need to start with, and that can be done much quicker than the review. Like, it's an excellent idea to be put on the agenda. It's triggered a lot of discussion, but I really need to know what the entire board looks like.
Okay. All right, so we do have a motion on the floor. I have a mover and a seconder. Unless I hear otherwise, I'm gonna call a question on that first motion. Okay. We'll read the motion for you.
The original one
I would just,
The amended.
with the amended one?
yeah, amended. Okay, so moved by Trustee McAllister, seconded by Trustee Buckland, that a review of the delivery of French as a second language program in the Upper Canada District School Board be conducted by the director and senior team. I'm gonna remove senior team. I'm just gonna clean it up because that's just, director needs more work. Within the context of the FSL framework in Ontario schools by January 2014, within the context of the 2000 boundary, I think we should call it what it is, the Boundary 2020 recommendations passed in May of 2008, May 14th of 2008. The reason I'm taking the director and the senior team is that we only instruct the director, just, that's why. Is that okay with you, John?
It's fine by me.
Trustee Buckland as seconder? Good. Okay, I'm gonna give one last chance to talk about the motion, this motion in particular. Are there any comments about the motion? Trustee Swan?
Would this include, as Trustee McPherson said, numbers of schools that are offering different programming for information purposes?
I think that in order for it to be properly done, they'd have to show us that we said that we would put French immersion at X school and that school had French immersion, that we would have kindergarten at 40 minutes and that all these schools have it at 40 minutes, these schools do not. there should be 0. Okay, like that should be the way the report comes back to some extent. I also think that there were concerns, and I would hope that they would touch on this, about things like teacher training that I don't know whether they were part of the recommendations, but I think that needs to be addressed in the report, because I think that's an important piece. But that's in the report itself, there's a discussion about that. So that, I think it would answer what you're asking for, a long way of saying that. Anybody else? Okay, go ahead and vote. Can't see. Trustee Garrow?
Vote for.
In favor?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. The motion passes with 2 opposed, Trustee McPherson and Trustee McDonald. All others in favor. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, next item is an update on Communication and Relationship Management Department. Director?
Yes, the fact is, over the course of the summer, you're aware of this, we've had some changes in the Department of Communications. And for the next approximate 3 months to 4 months, Terry Davis, who's with us as the Accountability Alignment Officer, will be the acting manager of communications. And the area of our board, and my executive assistant, Patty White, will take in an acting role the Accountability Alignment Officer's job, and she'll be taking this role over here, and I will be on the interim. Well, we're planning, as I made a commitment to you in the summer, with the plans to reshape the communications department. I'll come to that in January. At that particular time, you'll hear the rest of the news about what's going on in their communication relationship management department.
Okay.
I'll take any questions.
Any questions for the director?
John,
Trustee McAllister?
what's your question?
I don't know if you want to, you've limited yourself to the role of personnel as an update. Are you interested in talking about the plan?
No, I haven't. I really don't have the details yet to share those with you. But I'm the plan that you received earlier, that actually got a great deal of good feedback. We're not moving away from that right now. In fact, I've asked Terry Davis to dig in deeper with that plan, and it seems to be working quite well. And what I want to look at now is the long-term personnel makeup of the department.
Okay, any other comments or questions? All right, thank you. Next item, accountability framework update, Trustee McMillan?
Well, we will be having our first meeting September the 18th next week. Co-chairing the meeting with me will be Superintendent David Coombs, and I'm sure I can speak on his behalf. We're both very excited at moving the accountability framework forward. In that meeting, we're going to take a good look at the report, just to get us back all on the same playing field with the next level driven report that our Chair Petersma gave at I believe it was at the end of May. Early June.
May 30th.
May 30th, the excellent report that he gave to the board. And in that, a lot of the key terminology that we want to make sure that we all understand. Take a look at the definition for key performance indicators, key result indicators, and so on, so we're all on the same playing field. And then take a look at what we have already in place. And what I would like to do is every board meeting, or at least once a month, is report back. At least it'll be a standing item on the agenda, and just report what's coming out of the Accountability Framework Committee. And of course, anything any decisions that are made always comes back to board. So we're looking forward to moving this forward, and to me, I think I've said to the director, we've got an incredible strategic plan, and this is just gonna be the icing on the cake that's going to make this thing just tick. So we're excited, and I'm not sure, Co-Chair Coombe, if you have anything you wanna add, but. Okay.
The next Net Promoter Score will occur in October.
Yes.
I'll tell them that. Tell them that.
Well, I'll let you do that, seeing you just brought it up.
Yeah, so the next promoter score will be run in October to mirror exactly when it ran last year, which is an important part of doing the analysis to make sure you run it at the same time. So it'll be the same format, same everything, and let you know when we get the numbers back. We'll be able to we have a baseline now, so we'll be able to have some comparison to see how things have changed since last year.
Quite excited to get this thing moving forward.
Okay, any questions? All right, need a motion to move back into the regular board. Moved by trustee McMillan, seconded by trustee Swan.
I vote for Peter.
It's coming.
Coming.
Okay, report from privates, that passes instantly. So we're now back in regular meeting, report from private session, July 30th, one personnel was discussed, no recommendations were brought forward to the board. Report from public session committee of the whole, June 19th, there are no recommendations being brought forward to this meeting. We dealt with them all that night. Ontario Public School Board Association membership. All right, if you remember, this is an annual item that generally comes up in January, and last year we had some questions and thoughts, and we delayed the passage because it's in our bylaws. To approve this, we need to go back and approve it. I can tell you that we have paid this year's membership fee, so they always meet their deadlines. So I have approved that, so I'm hoping that you guys also approve this motion. Otherwise, I'll be paying $65,000 back, I guess, out of my pocket, right?
I move it.
Thanks, trustee Buckland. Seconded by trustee McDonald. Any comments or questions? You can go ahead and vote. That the Upper Canada District School Board renew the Ontario Public School Board Association membership 2013-14.
For Peter.
Okay, that passes unanimously. Superintendent of Human Resources, Charlotte Patterson. We're looking forward to your negotiations update. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Just to remind you that in the late spring, I brought to the board table a verbal update regarding our CUPE negotiations and our OSSTF negotiations, which includes our teacher bargaining unit, our occasional teacher bargaining unit, and our professional services unit. We have concluded negotiations with all of those groups. There have been some very minor local amendments to our collective agreement, and we have agreed to append the memorandum of understanding to the respective collective agreements. We've also signed the template that basically states that. With regard to ETFO, boards were given a bit of an extension, and we needed to complete our local negotiations with ETFO, our elementary teachers union, by the end of August, which we have done. The only outstanding issue there is the template which ETFO desires us to sign and attach to the agreements. And at this point in time, we are somewhat reluctant to do that. And this is consistent with action that the Elementary Teachers Federation has taken across the province. They essentially have a standard template, and they're looking for each board to sign that and append it to the collective agreement. In preparation for the next board meeting, September the 25th, what I would like to bring to you is a summary of the local amendments, I guess an executive summary, albeit they're quite minor, and also the specifics of each of the relevant MOUs, so you get a full understanding of what is contained in the MOUs, which in effect will become part of our local collective agreements. That's all I have.
Okay.
unless there are questions.
Trustee McAllister?
May I ask a question to
Yep,
Superintendent
go
Patterson?
ahead.
You have stated that you have signed the amendments and have agreed to attach the memorandum of understanding.
Yes.
I assume that is conditional upon board approval?
Yes, there was not at that time a requirement for boards to approve the memorandum of understanding, which is an agreement between the union and the province. Certainly as it relates to the local amendments, these were also, as was the MOU, ratified by the union membership, but the same requirement was not placed on the boards. It would rather come to the boards for information.
Go ahead.
Chair, I disagree with that. I believe that it should be, if the membership of the unions ratify it, then we too ought to ratify it, or be given the opportunity to ratify it.
Any other comments? Trustee McDonald?
But the memorandum of understanding is signed by the ministry, is that correct?
Yes, it is. It's signed by the respective union, provincial union presidents and representatives of the ministry.
So there's nothing for us to vote on?
The only, well, if I may, through the chair, you may wish to vote on the local amendments, which are limited and minor. There is no requirement necessarily to vote on the MOU. That being said, I understand that there are school boards who are doing exactly that.
My question is, what if we vote not in favor of it?
Well,
I don't, I mean, the other thing is, can somebody double check whether the locals voted on the MOUs? Because I don't know that they did. No. So there was no membership vote on the MOUs, from what I understand. It was done as provincial council voted for it or something. Anyway, so I think that's important. I think what Trustee McAllister, what Trustee McDonald raises is a good point. Like, if you can't vote against it, what are you voting for? And I don't know, I suppose you could vote against it, but Trustee McPherson?
I was thinking the song along the same lines as you, Greg. If there was no process for the local union to vote on it, it seems a moot point that we vote on it. But at the same time, I am sure that the details of that memorandum of understanding was shared with the local unions. So perhaps what we need to do is set up a process whereby we get detailed knowledge of what was in that agreement, and at that point, we probably would vote to receive it. That's just an idea, but.
Trustee McAllister?
There is a difference between receiving the
Oh, I know.
report
I've been here long enough to know that.
and voting for it or against it. And the reason I simply question it is because that whole process of Bill 125 excluded the boards.
Yeah.
And we are the employers. And frankly, yes, it would be a moot point to vote against it, but it might send a message to Queen's Park with regard to future negotiations.
I think that here's the problem, guys. And the legal framework for the government to do what they did really doesn't exist. All we need to do is to create the legal problem for somebody else to jump on and say, well, that board voted against it. That means it's not legal. Whereas, and I think we're just opening ourselves up for, something that I don't know that we really want to be part of. We're really not going to have, I think most of us are going to feel compelled to vote for it. It'll give a few of you the option of protesting. All right, so you get to protest. But you're going to have to rely on the rest of your colleagues to vote for it. And I'm not so sure as chair that I would be doing a great service to the board to put them in that position. That's sort of where I'm coming from. So unless I get specific direction from the board, I'm going to continue with my current stance on it and to view the MOUs as part of the collective agreements through regulation and legislation. Anything that we need to pass in order to trigger funding, we will bring to the board and we will pass that. But aside from that, unless I've received other direction, I'm going to leave it as be. Trustee Buckland?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I approve of the statement. Two questions. One, with that MOU, which gives reduced sick days and reduction of cost of living, is this income that is stripped from our budget, or would it allow us to use this money in a professional development way or some other way?
So the question is, any of the reduction, as you call it, strips from the collective agreement, is that money that was left in our budget? That's what you're asking? No.
Okay. I thought that. The other thing was that number 274. I'm concerned, I don't really understand it. Perhaps you could explain to me what the difference position of a principal is now in terms of hiring teachers.
Go ahead, Superintendent Patterson.
Through you, Chair, Regulation 274, first of all, is not part of the MOUs that was agreed to between the union and the province. It is a separate piece of legislation that governs how we hire our long-term occasional and our permanent teaching staff. And in order to be placed on the LTO, the long-term occasional roster, you need to have put in 1 year on the occasional teacher list, 10 months on the occasional teacher list, and taught for 20 days. So from the point of view of how does that change what a principal can do when he or she is recruiting for their school and hiring staff, they are limited to first consideration to those folks who are on the long-term occasional roster And as long as they are qualified, they are required to consider their candidates by seniority. They don't necessarily have to choose the most senior candidate, but they have to be able to articulate why they made a choice to the candidate and to anyone else who would appropriately ask. So for this, I think the biggest departure from previous practice is the opportunity to hire an external candidate, perhaps an exemplary teacher that you become aware of in the surrounding area from another school board, etc. It truly limits the mobility from board to board, and it also limits the opportunity for new graduates.
One tragedy. Thank you.
Trustee McAllister?
I'd like to go back to the MOU if I could. Are the contents and provisions of the MOU and the locally negotiated amendments fully funded by the provincial government?
We believe that they are. But that being said, we don't have there is still information being gathered by ministry folks to ascertain the costs of some of the issues that have not really been nailed down. I'll give you the example of maternity leave, of a change in your salary, so you're getting, instead of getting 6 weeks, you're getting 8 weeks. That's not your maternity leave, but that's your full salary at that time. So it's gone from 6 to 8. So in many boards, that's a significant change. It's not really in our board, but that would be an example of a parameter that's now come into place where they don't actually know the full cost of that. They have, the ministry actually has provided us with funds for implementation approximately, I would say approximately by the end of 13-14, about $1 million. And there will be more funding contingent upon attestation that the MOUs have been appended to the collective agreements. About approximately another $1 million. Those are ballpark figures.
Okay, any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much, Superintendent Patterson.
Thank you.
Nice to see the end of this standing. Just in time to start another one.
That's what I was thinking.
I could hear that. Director McDonald, report on the Ontario Public School Boards.
Thank you, Chair. I don't really have much to report on. We have a Board of Directors meeting scheduled for the end of this month. I will be away out of the country, actually, not able to attend, so Trustee Buckle will be attending on my behalf. We do have a regional meeting that's scheduled for October 26th that will be hosted by us at Upper Canada, and that is open to all trustees. And we will have some more information with that agenda established for that day as we move forward. But in October, we'll be able to provide you an update as to the Board of Directors in September, and more information about the regional meeting in
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Trustee Buckland?
Just to add, Corey, on the part of the board, we are well represented in the leadership role at Ontario Public School Trustees Association with Director McDonald, and we have the Trustee McAllister and Trustee Carpenter on program and policy, and Trustee Yarrow handling the First Nations. So I'm very pleased with the approval of our funding.
Chair Peters now?
Yeah, go ahead, Trustee Garrow.
Yes, 2 weeks ago, I was able to attend in Toronto a meeting with our Native trustees. We had a visit from Minister of Education Liz Sandos. We also had ADM Assistant Deputy Minister Griffor, and also Chiefs of Ontario representative and AFN. And we're putting together a response to federal government's legislation piece, but we also were able to put together a segment, and it was approved for a trustee's handbook. And tomorrow, one of our Native trustees is attending the Lieutenant Governor's meeting on Aboriginal Affairs, and the 22nd, the Minister of Education, Liz Sandos, is setting up her working group, and we've been invited as a Native Trustee Council to also attend that. So it's been a very busy summer in the sense of, we did have 12 people, and the board of directors have appointed Carmen McRae as the board rep on our Native trustees. So it was quite exciting, and I'll be submitting a report on that meeting.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Garrow. Trustee Carpenter?
Trustee McAllister and I will both be heading to Toronto tomorrow. I have a program and education meeting, and he has a policy meeting, so that's being held on Friday. So that's where we're headed.
Excellent. And I'm corrected, we haven't paid OPSPA's bill yet, so maybe we'll do it before you go down. I don't think they're worried.
Carol can take it with her.
There you go.
Student trustee Harbors, usually we get to a student trustee report at this time, but we figured since you haven't done your job for that long yet, you won't have much to report on. However, would you like to introduce your special guests? Yes.
I think we see them back there. Unless you have special drivers that.
My parents at the far back.
Thank you, Mom and Dad.
Yeah, thank you. All right, we're gonna expect more, okay, just so that you know. All right, that brings to an end our meeting for September 11th. Director, do you have any comments?
I would like to publicly thank the staff at BCI and our critical incident response team for the way they conducted themselves and how they handled themselves with the tragic critical accident on Highway number 2. A young man, as you know, Aaron, was killed just before school started, and the first day of school at BCI is supposed to be filled with all kinds of excitement, and we had our critical response team, and Susan had them well organized. And I must compliment Principal Loshaw, did an outstanding job and was just a pillar of strength for the community. I have been told by friends of the parents, very close friends, that they not only appreciated Bill's work and the work of the staff and how the students were received, but they appreciated the very respectful way that the board handled itself and supported the family in a very difficult time. And again, a real compliment to Bill. I don't think we're surprised at his professionalism, but a good person stood up and stood tall for all of us. So again, a sad moment for all of the students and families of Upper Canada, but we have moved forward in a very positive way. And I know this past week we've had the memorial at the school organized by the students and for the students, and it was very, very well received. And just on that sober note, perhaps something good will come out of a tragic incident of that nature.
All right, thank you, Director. A busy summer, as all of you noticed. Many of our schools had additions and getting ready for the rollout of FDK everywhere, and everybody seems to be very excited. about that program, so well done getting all that put together. It's good to see all trustees back at the table or on the phone, but in attendance. And I look forward to a busy, productive year. Lots and lots and lots of things to accomplish. So thanks, everyone, and I look for a motion to adjourn. Trustee McMillan, seconded by Trustee McPherson. And we will go ahead and pass your ballots.
I'm good with it.
You're good? You vote in favor?
I do.
Okay, everybody's in favor? All right, everyone. Thanks. See you in a couple weeks.